She stood there trembling, holding her torn hoodie against her chest, as Karen screamed from the porch, "This is a private community. Take that off right now." My niece Emily just froze. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and all she had on was a simple cropped sweatshirt with her school team's logo. But Karen, our HOA president, had decided it wasn't appropriate for the neighborhood. She walked closer, her heels crunching on the gravel, and hissed, "You'll respect the rules here, young lady, or I'll make sure your whole family gets fined." I heard the commotion from the garage and ran out, still holding my wrench. "Karen, what the hell is going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Emily's eyes were red, her voice shaking. "She said she'll call the HOA security if I—" "Don't take this off," Karen folded her arms, smirking. "Your niece is violating community decency codes. We don't allow revealing clothing in front of children." I almost laughed, but then I saw Emily's tears. "She's a child," I said quietly. "You're the one acting indecent." But Karen wasn't backing down. She snapped photos on her phone, muttering, "Evidence for the board." Then she pointed her finger right at me. "If you want to live here, teach your family some respect." Emily whispered, "Uncle, can we go inside?" And that broke something in me. I walked forward slowly, lowering my voice. "Karen, you crossed a line today. You humiliated a 15-year-old girl on her own driveway." She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Oh, please. You people think you can do whatever you want here, but not under my HOA." I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Instead, I just pulled out my phone and hit record. "Say that again," I told her. She froze for a second, then rolled her eyes. "You think that'll scare me?" I didn't answer. I just kept recording as she stormed off, muttering about rules and consequences. Emily stood beside me, trying not to cry. I told her softly, "Go inside, sweetheart. Don't worry, she'll regret this." Because what Karen didn't know was that her little rule-breaking neighbor had a brother who sat behind a judge's bench downtown, and he didn't take kindly to people like her. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. I could hear her sobbing through the thin walls. She kept whispering, "Uncle, everyone saw. She was recording me." And that shattered me. I promised her I'd take care of it. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to stop with humiliation. She wanted power. The next morning, I found a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. "Community violation. Public indecency, pending fine and disciplinary hearing." My blood boiled. Karen had actually filed a report against my 15-year-old niece. And at the bottom of the letter, she'd signed her name in bold, "Karen Whitmore, HOA President." I went straight to her house, phone in hand. She was already outside, watering her roses like nothing happened. "Karen," I said, "you need to take that notice down now." She didn't even look up. "You people think rules don't apply to you? This neighborhood has standards." "You humiliated a child," I said, trying to stay calm. "You filmed her." "That's illegal." Karen smirked, finally meeting my eyes. "Oh, I know the law better than you think. My cousin's a cop. Then maybe you should ask him what filming a minor without consent means." Her face twitched for a second, but she quickly masked it with a fake smile. "You're bluffing. The board's already informed. Your niece's behavior was inappropriate." Emily came out of the house just then, holding her school backpack. When she saw Karen, she froze. Karen turned to her and said coldly, "Don't look at me like that, young lady. You broke the rules." That's when I stepped between them. "Enough." My voice came out low, steady. "You're done talking to her." Karen scoffed. "Oh? Are you threatening an HOA official now?" I leaned closer, still recording. "No, I'm warning you. Because if you don't back off, this will go beyond the HOA." She laughed again, shaking her head. "You really think you scare me? You're just another angry uncle with a phone. I've dealt with your kind before." I smiled faintly. "Yeah," I said, pocketing my phone. "But you've never dealt with her brother." Karen frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Let's just say," I replied, "you're about to find out what real authority looks like." And for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, her fake confidence cracking.
She had no idea that the quiet girl she bullied
Had a brother whose signature could change her whole life. By the next afternoon, word had already spread through the neighborhood. Karen must have thought she'd won, because she strutted around the cul-de-sac like she was the mayor. Every time she saw me, she'd smirk and say loud enough for others to hear, "Some people just don't belong here." But what she didn't know was that I had already called Emily's brother, Mark, the The moment he heard what happened, his voice turned cold. She forced her to undress, he asked. I could hear his breath tighten over the phone. That's harassment, and filming her makes it criminal. I've got everything on video, I said. The moment she yelled at Emily, the threats, the fake violation notice, everything. Mark sighed slowly. Good, don't confront her again. Let me handle it. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of my house. Karen was outside again, pretending to sweep her driveway. But she couldn't hide her curiosity. When Mark stepped out, wearing his formal gray suit and calm expression, her broom literally froze midair. Morning, he said politely, walking toward her. You must be Mrs. Whitmore? Karen's eyes darted nervously. Yes, and you are? Mark Evans, he said smoothly. Emily's brother. Karen blinked, confused. Oh, right. The girl from the other day. I hope she's learned. Mark raised a hand gently. Let's not do that. I reviewed the footage. He glanced back at me, then back at her. You humiliated a minor, filmed her without consent, and distributed a notice calling her indecent. Do you realize that's a felony in this state?
Karen's face went pale.
Excuse me? You can't talk to me like that. I'm the HOA president. Mark smiled faintly. That's good to know, because I'm the one who signs warrants against people who misuse authority. Karen blinked, frowning in confusion. Then the color drained from her face. Wait, you're a county judge, he finished quietly, and you've just admitted on camera to violating multiple laws. Her fake composure cracked completely. She stammered, You can't threaten me. I was just enforcing HOA standards. Mark's voice remained calm, but his words cut through the air. Show rules don't override human rights. Mrs. Whitmore, what you did wasn't enforcement, it was harassment. For once, Karen didn't have anything to say. She just stood there, clutching her broom, shaking slightly as neighbors peeked through their windows. Mark turned to me and said, We'll handle this the right way. Don't delete anything. As they walked back to the car, Karen finally whispered, You'll regret this. Mark paused, gave her one last look, and said softly, No, ma'am. You will. The next morning, Karen's perfect little world began to crumble. A county vehicle parked in front of her home, and 2 officers from the sheriff's department stepped out with official-looking folders. I watched from my porch as Karen ran outside in her robe, waving her hands, pretending she didn't know what was happening. Ma'am, one officer said calmly, We're here regarding a report of harassment and unlawful recording of a minor. We just need to ask you a few questions. Karen's voice trembled. This is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong. That man, he's trying to frame me. She pointed straight at me, her fingers shaking. I didn't even respond. I just folded my arms and watched as they continued. The other officer said, We've already seen the footage. Mrs. Whitmore, and there's a court order attached. You're required to appear before Judge Mark Evans next Monday. When she heard his name, her face drained of color. Judge Evans? She whispered. The officer nodded. Yes, ma'am. The same one handling your case. Karen stumbled back a little, gripping the edge of her mailbox as her composure cracked. He's related to them? The officer looked at her blankly. Ma'am, we don't comment on personal matters, but you'll want to bring legal representation. By noon, the entire neighborhood knew. Phones buzzed. Gossip spread like wildfire. People who once smiled politely at Karen now avoided her completely. Even her closest board members began distancing themselves. That evening, she showed up at my door, eyes red and voice trembling. Please, she whispered, can we just talk? I didn't answer right away. Emily stood behind me, half hidden, watching. Karen continued, I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just wanted people to follow the rules. I didn't know she was... I interrupted, my tone calm but cold. You didn't know she was human? Or you just didn't care? Tears rolled down her cheeks. Please, I'll take it all back. The notice, the videos, everything. I sighed, shaking my head. It's not about taking it back. Karen, it's about what you thought you had the right to do. She dropped her gaze to the floor, whispering, He's really a judge. Isn't he? Yes, I said quietly. And he doesn't bend for people who abuse power. She looked up, desperate. Can't you tell him I'm sorry? I met her eyes one last time. You can tell him yourself on Monday. The door closed softly, and for the first time since all this started, Emily smiled a little. Uncle, she said quietly, is she really going to court? I nodded. Yes, sweetheart. And this time she won't be the one making the rules. Monday morning came bright and cold. The courthouse. Steps were filled with the same neighbors who once whispered behind our backs, but now they weren't whispering about us anymore. They were staring at Karen. She stood there in her stiff blazer, clutching her purse, her face pale under the weight of what she'd done. Inside, Judge Mark Evans entered the courtroom, calm, composed, but with a fire in his eyes that only family could recognize. Karen couldn't even meet his gaze. When the clerk read the charges, harassment, unlawful recording of a minor, defamation, she just kept shaking her head, whispering to herself, it was just a misunderstanding. Mark looked at her for a long moment before speaking. Mrs. Whitmore, he said slowly, in this country, we don't give people power so they can humiliate others. The law protects everyone, especially those who can't protect themselves. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. He nodded once. Intent doesn't erase the damage you caused, and the damage you caused to my sister will not go unanswered. You could hear a pin drop. Karen looked up in shock, realizing, too late, that the man sitting behind the bench wasn't just another judge. He was the brother of the girl she'd tried to shame. The verdict came fast. Community service, fines, and a formal public apology. But the real punishment wasn't written on paper. It was in the way the entire town now looked at her. The woman who once ruled the neighborhood with fear now walked with her head down, her fake authority stripped away. Outside the courthouse, Emily held my hand. The autumn wind brushed her hair across her face, and for the first time in weeks she smiled. It's over, right? She asked softly. Yeah, I said, wrapping an arm around her. It's over. Across the street, Karen stood alone, watching us quietly. She didn't say a word. Maybe she'd finally learned what respect really meant. As we walked toward the car, Mark stopped for a moment and looked back at the courthouse. You know, he said almost to himself, power's a funny thing. Some people think it means control, but real power is knowing when to stand up for what's right. Emily squeezed his hand and whispered, Thanks, big brother. He smiled, looking down at her. You never needed me to fight for you. You just needed someone to remind them who they were messing with. And as we drove away, sunlight breaking through the clouds, one thing became clear. Karen's reign over the neighborhood was done. Justice had spoken, and this time it wore no robe of arrogance, just the quiet strength of truth. Viral line. She made rules to control everyone until the law reminded her who it really answers to.